Let's talk about these tense two-front situations in Israel right now and the effect on the upcoming elections with our panel. And joining us is Middle East expert Micah Halpern and Middle East Mendez, also a Middle East expert at the Israel Project. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Elliot, let's start with you. We have this tense calm now. Is this the calm before the storm? Do you expect a bigger retaliation from the IDF, or is this it for now?
I think we're going to have to wait and see what develops. Israel has been consistent in its message that it'll meet quiet with quiet. The challenge at the moment, and what the Egyptian mediators are going to have to figure out, is Hamas willing to abandon the incendiary tactics that they've continued to use along the southern border? Hamas is willing to back off of the rockets, but is not willing to give up the balloons, the incendiary devices, the March of Return. Is Hamas actually willing to step back from those activities and legitimately and genuinely meet quiet for quiet?
Micah, should there be quiet for quiet?
No.
Because it seems as though many in the Israeli public don't think so.
Yeah, Israelis really want a response. The problem is that it's the eve of an election, and on the eve of an election, a prime minister can't send troops in on the ground. It's just impossible. They might send a strike force in at night to kidnap or to do something special, but they can't actually send them in on the ground. They have to attack from the air, and that's what they're going to do. These are gestures bringing the troops to the Gaza border. They can't actually attack. It would be suicide politically for Netanyahu to do it.
You mean in terms of sending troops in on the ground?
Correct.
All right, but Elliot, as Micah just mentioned, most Israelis are not satisfied with the government and the army's response to the recent rocket fire at the country from the Gaza Strip. For example, an army radio poll finding that 54% of Israelis are not satisfied with how Netanyahu confronted these attacks. Another poll by the Khan public broadcaster saying 53% think that the Israeli Defense Force response to the rockets was too weak. How do the upcoming elections impact Prime Minister Netanyahu's response?
The Prime Minister has a very delicate line to walk. For a while now, he's been on the more restrained side of his own party, Likud, and he is wanting to push back as much as he can to satisfy the base, while also not going too far as to upset the rest of the public. The polls are, I've seen the polls, and they have demonstrated that the public wants to do more, that the situation at the Gaza, with Gaza is not, the status quo is not maintainable, and that Israelis are concerned about their deterrent position as relates to Gaza. So the Prime Minister is going to have to make some very tough decisions in the next period of time when he's running against a party that has 3 former IDF chiefs of staff in it, and it has a legitimate claim to also be able to manage the security situation, which has been Prime Minister Netanyahu's claim to fame and the main thing that he's fallen back on over the last several elections.
Micah, the Hamas terrorist group is claiming that there is a ceasefire. We heard from Israel's foreign minister saying that there isn't actually a ceasefire. Why should there be one? Why should the same pattern be repeated where Hamas attacks, Israel retaliates whilst holding its foot on the brake, certainly not unleashing anywhere near its full military might, and then there's calm until Hamas breaks the ceasefire again, Israelis get hurt or injured or sometimes even killed, and then Israel retaliates again until there's another ceasefire. Why does it make sense for Israel to keep up with this pattern?
Israel right now is not actually built to solve the problem in Gaza yet. They can't actually, and this is a serious problem and dilemma within Israeli society, Israel is not committed to actually sending troops in on the ground for a long-term basis in order to really wipe out Hamas at this stage. Not just on the eve of the elections, even after the election. So no party, regardless of who it is going to be doing that. Because Israel right now literally preserves and respects its own personal lives and the lives of their children too much. They're not willing to put them on the line right now. And that's a big issue. I will say that Hamas knows that, which is why they're pushing Israel to do these things. They're pushing them on the brink. They're actually pushing them over the brink. And at a certain point in time, Egypt, that doesn't like Hamas at all, is stepping in order to create this ceasefire. Israel is right, though. They have not signed up on this ceasefire. They absolutely reserve the right to retaliate, to actually defend themselves in advance and because of attacks that were hit against them.
Elliot, very quickly, what's your response to that?
Look, obviously Israel, like any other country, has a right to and an obligation to defend its border. This is an international border. Israel, for 12 years, Hamas has ruled this. The people of Gaza are trapped by the terrorist leadership of Hamas. And frankly, we're not seeing enough stories, not just about what's happening this week, but about what Hamas is doing against the genuine protests that are happening within Gaza, opening fire on their own citizens. So Israel has an obligation to respond to defend its own citizens, as well as making sure that Hamas is held accountable.
All right, stick around, gentlemen. All right, let's get more from my panel. Middle East expert Micah Halpern and Elliot Mendes, also a Middle East expert at the Israel Project. Elliot, the EU and the UN not recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights as expected. The Arab world has voiced opposition, but it seems as though the Arab response has been more muted than expected. Do you agree?
Yes. Look, for those who said that the U.S. recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights was going to inspire some sort of riots and chaos throughout the Middle East and through the people, the only folks outside of the state capitals of some countries in the Middle East that seem really up in arms about it are those at the United Nations. The facts on the ground bear out that Israel is going to remain in control of the Golan Heights. If you look at what's on the other side of the border, a countless amount of terrorist organizations, a dictator who uses chemical weapons against his own people, and Iran trying to establish a foothold within Syria, there's no set of circumstances alongside the failed state of Syria where Israel is going to give up control of the Golan Heights. So this is simply a recognition of the reality on the ground, and the Arab worlds the Arab states who are also against Iran's hegemonic aspirations are more than happy to accept this and go along with it. However, they have to put out lip service otherwise.
Micah, does it really matter what the EU and the UN have to say? They didn't recognize it before. They don't recognize it now. But as Elliot says, this has been the reality on the ground. So does it matter?
Yeah, I wish I could say it did matter. I wish the institution of the United Nations had the gravitas to actually do something and accomplish something on this issue. They don't. The EU also. They are powerless, and all they are is blustering wind. There's nothing of import here. The reality is that Israel controls the area. They control it for a reason, and they're not giving it up. The fact that the United States sees the realpolitik here is very important. There is de facto control and de jure control. If the international community, specifically the UN, does not recognize it, tough. It's not going to send any new message to Israel. And you should note, by the way, it has been not just muted in terms of the Arabic world, it is almost non-existent.
Right.
I read the Arabic press every day from dozens of papers, and it was almost a blip in their coverage.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's not important to them, and if it was important, they would step forward. Also because they realize that right now the people who are pulling the strings in Syria are the Iranians, and they're not there to give them any support. The Arabic world is not supporting the Iranians at all.
Elliot, is there a downside for Israel in the U.S. Bringing this issue back to the fore, in the U.S. officially giving this recognition, even as we've just said, de facto, it's been the case anyway? Is there a downside?
No, this is an issue that has long garnered bipartisan support. Democrats and Republicans have recognized the security reality on the ground and have acknowledged that Israeli sovereignty over the Golan is what is ultimately going to be in the long term. I think, to reference the other issue brought up about the precipice of the announcement of the peace plan, it's important to take that into context. For administration after administration, anytime an attempt at rolling out a peace plan or formula has been brought up, one of the cornerstones has been making sure that Israel feels safe and secure. And if you look at what this administration has done in the last couple of years, to make Israel feel safe and secure, recognizing Jerusalem as a capital without defining boundaries, and now recognizing sovereignty over the Golan, something that won't actually be part of the equation in the negotiations with the Palestinians. I think you see a pattern and a strategy around how to optimize Israel feeling safe and secure about whatever emerges from the administration.
Elliot, thank you so much. Appreciate your insight. Elliot Mendes, Micah Halpern, thank you to you both.